Title: Introduction, Expanded. Rachel stood at the bedroom window, her fingers trailing along the cool glass as she watched the first light of dawn inch across the sky, casting a soft, golden glow over the sleepy world below. The sun's warm hue kissed the treetops and rooftops in the distance, turning the mundane into something beautiful. Today was her and Tom's 10th wedding anniversary, a milestone she had once dreamed of celebrating with joy and gratitude. Tonight, their home would be filled with friends and family, a lavish party to honor a decade of love, shared dreams, and the life they had built together. The house would be decorated with flowers, laughter would echo in the halls, and glasses would be raised to their union. Everything was perfect. At least, that's how it looked from the outside. Rachel took a deep breath, pressing her palm flat against the window, as if she could somehow draw strength from the outside world. The truth was far from the perfect image they presented to others. Behind her practiced smile, Rachel carried a heavy burden, one that had settled deep in her bones, growing heavier with each passing day. There was a secret wedged between her and Tom, a divide that had widened over the past few months, threatening to swallow her whole. He didn't know she had noticed, but she had. The first sign had been so small, it almost slipped by unnoticed. Tom coming home later than usual, blaming work, always brushing off her questions with a casual, "Just a long day, babe." Then, there had been the distant looks, the way his eyes seemed to drift away even when they sat together at dinner, as if he were somewhere else. Their conversations had become more transactional, less intimate. His touch had grown mechanical, lacking the tenderness that had once been effortless between them. The pit in her stomach, which she had tried to ignore, had grown into a gaping chasm of doubt. She tried to push it aside, telling herself it was just stress. Tom was a lawyer at a high-powered firm, and everyone knew how demanding that could be. Maybe he was just tired. Maybe she was reading too much into things. But deep down, in the quiet moments when she lay awake next to him, staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully, Rachel couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Today, as the anniversary she had once eagerly anticipated loomed, Rachel felt her heart constrict with unease. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, a celebration of their love, of the life they had built together. But now, instead of joy, she was filled with dread. What should have been a moment of pride felt like a cruel joke, a reminder of everything that had unraveled beneath the surface of their marriage. As she stood at the window, lost in thought, her fingers absently reached for the delicate diamond necklace that hung around her neck. Tom had given it to her just 2 days ago, a gift to mark their upcoming anniversary. It was beautiful, elegant, understated, just like the first piece of jewelry he had ever given her when they were dating. She remembered the way his eyes had sparkled when he fastened it around her neck, the way he had smiled as if nothing was wrong. But something was wrong. Rachel's thoughts drifted back to the exact moment when everything had changed. It hadn't been just one thing. No, it was a series of subtle signs that, when pieced together, told a story she wasn't ready to face. But the turning point, the moment when she could no longer deny what was happening, had come unexpectedly. It was just after their daughter Mia's 7th birthday party. Rachel had been cleaning up the decorations, her mind still buzzing from the day's excitement, when she'd found it, an unfamiliar scent on Tom's jacket. She had tried to rationalize it, but her mind had gone into overdrive. Later, there was the lipstick on his collar, not her shade. The suspicious text messages, the missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. And then, the hotel receipt, the final nail in the coffin of her trust. She had confronted him once, casually, testing the waters, but Tom was quick to reassure her, his words smooth and practiced. He made it all sound so reasonable, so easily explained away. "You're overthinking it, Ratch," he had said, his smile almost convincing. Almost. But Rachel wasn't overthinking it. The weight in her gut told her everything she needed to know. Tom was hiding something. And as much as she wanted to believe in their marriage, in the life they had built together, she knew the truth was waiting to be uncovered, like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode. Tonight, at the party, everything would come to light. She wasn't just hosting a celebration of their love anymore. No, Tonight was the night she would find out what her husband had been hiding. And once she knew, she would decide what to do next. Rachel closed her eyes, steeling herself for the evening ahead. There would be no going back after tonight. Everything was about to change. Act 1. The discovery expanded. It had all started a few weeks ago, the day after their daughter Mia's birthday. The house was still scattered with remnants of the celebration. Balloons drifting lazily against the walls, a half-eaten cake tucked away in the fridge, and toys strewn across the living room floor. Rachel had felt a surge of happiness, watching Mia beam as she opened her gifts, her laughter filling the air like sweet music. But the warmth of that day began to fade into something darker as she noticed the growing distance between herself and Tom. Tom had been coming home late from work more frequently, his absences stretching longer into the night. He always had the same vague excuses: meetings running long, client dinners, sudden last-minute trips. At first, Rachel had tried to convince herself that it was all part of the job. After all, he was a corporate lawyer in a demanding firm, and the pressure could be overwhelming. Yet, as the weeks went by, the weight of those excuses felt increasingly heavy. There was a subtle shift in the atmosphere at home, a tension that hung in the air like a thick fog. Rachel tried to engage him, asking about his day, but he would brush her off with a distracted nod, his eyes glued to his phone or the television. Each time he answered with a rehearsed smile, she felt her heart sink a little deeper. He had become an expert at evasion, effortlessly deflecting her concerns while his body language screamed that he was miles away. The late nights were accompanied by secretive phone calls he took in hushed tones. She would catch snippets of conversations, fragments of laughter, low murmurs that ended abruptly when she entered the room. He would step out into the hallway or leave the house altogether to talk, always with a furtive glance over his shoulder. It was in those moments, watching him retreat into the shadows, that Rachel felt a sinking feeling in her stomach. His phone had become an extension of his hand, always locked and always within arm's reach, as if it contained secrets he dared not share. Rachel tried to quell her growing suspicions, telling herself she was imagining things. She had even confided in Claire, her best friend from college, who had assured her that it was probably just stress. "You know how demanding Tom's job can be," Claire had said, wrapping an arm around her shoulder, attempting to comfort her. "You'll see. He'll come around." But the reassurance felt hollow as she watched the distance between them widen, the cracks in their once solid foundation deepening. The final straw came one fateful afternoon when Rachel was folding laundry in the quiet of their bedroom. The rhythmic sound of the washing machine hummed in the background, but her mind was elsewhere, anxiously mulling over her growing concerns. As she sorted through Tom's suit jackets, she caught sight of something crumpled in the pocket of his favorite navy blazer. Heart pounding, she fished it out, the fabric brushing against her fingers. The moment she saw the hotel logo emblazoned on the receipt, time seemed to freeze. It was dated for a night. He had told her he was on a business trip in New York. Rachel's heart plummeted as she registered the details. The receipt wasn't from New York. It was from a hotel just 20 minutes away. Her hands trembled as she stared at the receipt, her vision blurring as hot tears welled in her eyes. It felt as though someone had punched her in the gut, the air whooshing out of her lungs. This wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was proof of betrayal, a tangible confirmation of everything she had feared. The nausea washed over her, threatening to pull her under. She had known something was wrong for weeks, but this was the dagger that shattered her heart. That night, after Tom had fallen asleep, Rachel made her move. She lay next to him, his steady breathing confirming he was deep in sleep, and waited. Each passing minute felt like an eternity. The stillness of the room was deafening, and her heart raced in her chest, each beat echoing her resolve. She knew she had to do this. Quietly, she reached for his phone, which lay charging on the nightstand, and her fingers brushed against the cool surface. Her heart pounded as she unlocked it using the password she had memorized from watching him over the years. He always kept it the same. The screen illuminated her face as she hesitated, a mix of anticipation and dread coursing through her veins. Taking a deep breath, she began scrolling through the messages, her heart racing with each passing second. The messages were there, all under the name Chris. Rachel almost laughed at the absurdity of it. Chris? The most generic name he could think of? But as she delved deeper, her heart dropped. It didn't take long for her to realize that this Chris wasn't a man, but Claire, her best friend, one of her closest confidants. As she scrolled through months of intimate messages, her hands shook with disbelief. The words leapt off the screen, each one cutting deeper than the last. "Can't wait to see you again," one read, followed by heart emojis and flirty comments that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. Rachel felt the betrayal crash over her like a wave, pulling her under. The realization of their affair felt like a vice tightening around her chest, making it hard to breathe. Her stomach twisted in knots as she read the messages that were meant for her, words that should have been a shared connection between her and Tom. The betrayal cut deep, not just from Tom, but from Claire. How could they both do this to her? The thought of her best friend lying to her face, laughing and sharing moments while secretly betraying her trust was unbearable. Rachel bit her lip until she tasted blood, the sharp pain grounding her as sobs threatened to erupt from her chest. With each new revelation, her mind raced, her heart shattered. She felt like an outsider peering into a distorted reflection of her life. The pain clawed at her insides, threatening to consume her whole. And in that moment of gut-wrenching clarity, Rachel made a silent vow. She wouldn't let this go unanswered. The night had become a turning point, a catalyst for change that would set into motion a chain of events she could never have predicted. The life she thought she knew was over, but it was time for her to reclaim her power and her voice. Act 2. The plan expanded. For days, Rachel carried the weight of her discovery like a leaden anchor, pulling her deeper into an abyss of despair. The gut-wrenching reality of Tom's betrayal gnawed at her insides, churning her stomach into knots. Torn between the urge to confront him and the facade of normalcy she desperately tried to maintain, she felt like an actress in a twisted play, going through the motions of life while the world around her turned into a surreal nightmare. Each morning, she woke up early to prepare breakfast, her hands moving automatically as she flipped pancakes and poured juice, all while her mind raced with images of Tom's texts. Her heart sank as she glanced at the empty spot beside her on the bed, where he should have been, the betrayal hanging between them like a thick fog. When the kids scampered down the stairs, laughing and unaware of the storm brewing beneath her composed exterior, Rachel plastered on a smile, greeting them with enthusiasm. But inside, she felt hollow, as if someone had siphoned the joy out of her life, leaving only the residue of pain. At work, Rachel managed to navigate her tasks efficiently, answering emails and attending meetings with a practiced smile. But even the simplest interactions felt like a mask slipping away. Conversations with colleagues turned into trivialities, the laughter of her coworkers fading into the background as her thoughts remained fixated on the betrayal. She found herself daydreaming about confronting Tom, imagining the fiery exchanges, but then she'd catch herself and return to her daily routine, determined to keep up appearances. The date of their anniversary party loomed ahead, a bittersweet reminder of everything she had once cherished. Rachel threw herself into the planning, meticulously organizing every detail while grappling with her emotions. She chose decorations that sparkled and shone, trying to recapture the magic of their past. But with each passing day, as she picked out flowers and arranged seating charts, the rage she had buried began to bubble to the surface, clawing for release. The anger came soon after the heartbreak, a visceral response that coursed through her veins like fire. How could Tom and Claire have been so deceitful? How long had they been laughing behind her back, pretending everything was fine while plotting their betrayal? The thought of the two of them together was unbearable, a bitter pill she had to swallow. She could no longer allow them to enjoy their secret lives while she played the oblivious fool. And then, a deliciously wicked idea began to take shape in her mind, one that made her heart race with exhilaration. Why confront them privately and let them dismiss her pain? Instead, Rachel decided to expose them both publicly, in front of everyone they cared about, where they could no longer hide. The thought sent a surge of adrenaline through her. She could almost taste the sweet satisfaction of their downfall. The upcoming anniversary party was her stage, the perfect opportunity to unveil the truth. She envisioned the look on Tom's face when he realized what she was about to do. Rachel would invite all their closest friends and family, including Claire, of course, to bear witness to the fallout. It was poetic justice in her mind. A celebration turned spectacle, a night of reckoning. In the days leading up to the party, Rachel put on her best performance, embodying the role of the perfect wife. She laughed a little louder, smiled a little brighter, and made a point to compliment Tom's efforts in planning the event. She wanted him to feel comfortable, unsuspecting. While he was busy curating a sentimental slideshow of their life together, Rachel was scheming, savoring every moment of her secret preparation. The slideshow presentation would be her key, the heart of her plan. Tom had been excitedly gathering photos from their wedding day, cherished vacations, and milestones with the kids, all meant to capture the essence of their 10 years together. But Rachel had a different vision for the finale. Instead of the carefully crafted montage celebrating their love, she would swap out the last few slides for something much more revealing. Screenshots of the messages between Tom and Claire, incriminating photos from their clandestine meetings, and maybe even that damning hotel receipt that had shattered her world. She spent late nights crafting the new slides, her fingers trembling with anticipation as she compiled evidence of their betrayal. Each click of the mouse felt cathartic, releasing the tension that had built up inside her for weeks. As she pieced together the visual narrative of deception, she imagined the shock on Tom's face, the stunned silence of their friends, and the disbelief in Claire's eyes. In the crowd, watching the slideshow unfold, Rachel felt an electric charge in the air, a tension that seemed to seep from her very pores. She exchanged glances with Claire, who smiled and clapped along, completely unaware of the impending chaos. Rachel could hardly contain her mounting anticipation, and with each passing slide, she felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins, preparing her for the reveal. Then came the moment Rachel had been waiting for, the pivotal shift in the narrative that would shatter the idyllic atmosphere. As Tom clicked to the next slide, the screen filled with an image of a romantic dinner setting, 2 wine glasses, a flickering candle, and a sunset painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Rachel's breath hitched, a knot forming in her throat. She could sense the shift in energy among the guests as they leaned in, curious about the story behind this seemingly innocuous picture. "Ah, this was a great night," Tom began, his voice filled with nostalgia. "I remember this one. Rachel was so surprised when I pulled out all the stops for our anniversary dinner 2 years ago." He chuckled, casting a sidelong glance at Rachel, whose heart sank deeper into the pit of her stomach. But the next slide sent a jolt through her, a screenshot of a text conversation between Tom and Claire, a flow of flirty messages that had once burned like acid in Rachel's chest. As the crowd leaned closer, Tom's voice faltered, confusion knitting his brow. What is this?" he stammered, the facade of his narrative crumbling as the reality of the moment hit. Rachel stepped forward, her pulse pounding in her ears, feeling the eyes of their friends shift from the screen to her, wide with disbelief. "This is what I found when I looked into your phone, Tom," she declared, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions churning inside her. "A private affair that you thought would stay hidden, but I'm here to expose the truth." Gasps rippled through the crowd as she clicked to the next slide, a damning photo of Tom and Claire together at the hotel she had discovered. Smiling, intimate, a snapshot of betrayal captured in a single frame. Tom's face drained of color as he took a step back, shock etched across his features. The room fell into a tense silence, the laughter of moments ago replaced by a thick air of disbelief. Rachel could see Claire's mouth fall open in horror as realization dawned upon her. "I wanted you to know tonight, on what was supposed to be our celebration of love, that you've betrayed me with someone I trusted," Rachel continued, her voice gaining strength. "I won't let you two laugh behind my back anymore. This is the end of the lies." The crowd was frozen in stunned silence, their faces a mix of shock and sympathy. Rachel's heart raced as she stood before them, a mixture of vulnerability and empowerment coursing through her. She had turned the tables, the power shifting from the betrayers to the betrayed. In that moment, amidst the gasps and murmurs of disbelief, Rachel felt a surge of freedom, a release from the shackles of her pain. The party that had started as a celebration was now a reckoning, and she was finally ready to reclaim her narrative. Act 4. The revelation expanded. Just as Tom reached the climax of his slideshow, a heartwarming photo of their family at the beach, sunlight dancing in their smiles, Rachel felt her pulse quicken. This was the moment she had been meticulously crafting, and she could hardly contain the surge of adrenaline coursing through her. With her heart pounding in her ears, she discreetly pressed a button on the remote she had hidden in her palm, and in an instant, the screen went dark. A hush fell over the crowd, the laughter and chatter suddenly replaced by an eerie silence. Then, as the first damning screenshot flickered into view, the tension in the room shifted. The bright, cheery memories were swallowed by a stark white backdrop filled with flirty texts, suggestive comments, and intimate exchanges. Words that had once been. When the truth came to light, it would be a moment etched in time, one where she would reclaim her power and shatter the illusion of their perfect life. Every time Rachel thought about the party, a surge of adrenaline coursed through her. Tom thought he was so clever, weaving a web of lies that kept them both safe. But tonight, Rachel would have the last word. She reveled in the anticipation, a dark thrill that propelled her forward. No longer the victim, she was ready to become the author of her own story, ready to expose the truth and reclaim her life. The stage was set, and the curtain was about to rise on the most unforgettable anniversary of her life. Act 3. The party begins, expanded. The evening of the party arrived, transforming Rachel's home into a sparkling hub of laughter and celebration. The air was alive with chatter and the clinking of glasses, each sound echoing her internal turmoil. She had gone all out for this event, adorning the space with twinkling fairy lights, vibrant floral arrangements, and elegant table settings that set a picturesque scene. But beneath the surface of this perfect gathering, Rachel was a tightly wound spring, her anticipation palpable as she moved gracefully through the crowd. Guests filled the living room, mingling and savoring the assortment of appetizers Rachel had prepared. Each smile she wore felt like a mask, a carefully crafted facade designed to conceal the tempest churning within her. As she greeted friends, refilled drinks, and ensured everything was in place, her heart raced, a constant reminder of the explosive moment that lay just ahead. She had become a master of hiding her true feelings, balancing the act of a perfect hostess with the role of a woman on the verge of reclaiming her life. Tom, completely unaware of the emotional maelstrom surrounding him, was the picture of relaxed charm. He moved among their guests like a seasoned performer, spinning tales of their life together with a captivating ease. His laughter rang out as he raised a glass to Rachel, calling her his rock, a term she had once cherished but now felt like a bitter joke. She could barely stand to look at him, the sight of his easy smile and carefree demeanor twisting her stomach into knots. But tonight was not about him. It was about her. The time wasn't right yet. She had to wait. Then Claire arrived fashionably late, her entrance a spectacle in itself. She floated into the room wearing a striking red dress that clung to her curves in all the right places, drawing appreciative glances from the crowd. Rachel's stomach churned at the sight of her former best friend, the very woman who had betrayed her. Yet, she approached Claire with a practiced smile, wrapping her arms around her in a hug that felt as unnatural as it was painful. "You look amazing," Rachel managed, forcing enthusiasm into her voice, all while envisioning the confrontation that awaited. As the evening continued, Rachel remained on high alert, her senses heightened as the moment of truth inched closer. Tom had just finished mingling, engaging their guests in animated conversation, and he seemed to be in high spirits, blissfully ignorant of the storm about to unfold. With a beaming smile, he approached the front of the room, clapping his hands together to garner everyone's attention. "Everyone, gather around. It's time for a little trip down memory lane," he announced, his voice full of pride and excitement. Rachel's heart raced as the lights dimmed and the slideshow began, each flickering image bringing her closer to the confrontation she had meticulously planned. The first few slides were everything Tom had promised, a romantic montage of their wedding day, the giddy smiles of their first home, and candid shots of their children as babies. The room was filled with warmth and nostalgia, friends and family sharing smiles and laughter as they reminisced about those cherished moments. Rachel's chest tightened, the bittersweet memories intertwining with the bitter realization of Tom's betrayal. As she stood, private and tantalizing now became public, displayed for all to see. At first, confusion reigned among the guests. Murmurs began as they leaned closer, squinting at the screen as if willing the words to rearrange into something more innocuous. But the truth was undeniable, and as the slideshow progressed, a series of revealing images followed. Smirking selfies, stolen moments, and a cascade of intimate photos that told a story of betrayal. Rachel's heart raced as she observed the dawning horror on her friends' faces. Gasps filled the room, the air thick with disbelief as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Claire's vibrant red dress, once the center of attention, now seemed to absorb all the light in the room, her complexion paling with each new revelation. The final slide was the undeniable kicker. A copy of the hotel receipt, time-stamped with the date and location of their secret rendezvous, the message unmistakable and damning. Tom froze, the confident smile wiped from his face as his mouth hung open in shock. For the first time all night, he was utterly speechless, a reaction Rachel had not anticipated. He was always so quick with words, so adept at spinning his narrative. Rachel stood up from her chair, the weight of the moment propelling her forward with a newfound clarity. She took a breath, steadying herself as she addressed the room. "I thought tonight was going to be a celebration of 10 years of love and commitment," she declared, her voice ringing out strong and clear, slicing through the stunned silence like a knife. "But instead, we're here to witness the end of a lie." She turned to Tom, locking eyes with him for the first time since the evening began. It was a moment charged with raw emotion, their shared history hanging heavy between them. "I know about you and Claire. I've known for weeks. And now, everyone else does too." Her words hung in the air, a taut string ready to snap. The room erupted into chaos. Guests whispered among themselves, the once joyous atmosphere now thick with disbelief and shock. Claire, her face drained of color, made a frantic attempt to sneak out the back door, her trembling hands gripping the edges of the table for support. But a small group of friends, their expressions a mix of concern and outrage, blocked her path, demanding answers. Tom stammered, his voice faltering as he tried to find words to defend himself, to explain away the unexplainable. But Rachel silenced him with a sharp glance, her gaze steely and unwavering. "You don't get to talk your way out of this," she said coldly, each word a deliberate strike aimed at shattering his attempts to regain control of the situation. "Not this time." The room buzzed with confusion and anger as guests debated how to react. Friends of Tom and Claire struggled to reconcile the person they thought they knew with the betrayal now laid bare before them. Rachel watched as some turned their backs on Claire, others whispered judgments about Tom, their expressions shifting from sympathy to incredulity. In that moment of chaos, Rachel felt a strange sense of empowerment. This was her moment of reclaiming her narrative, her story, and she was no longer the passive victim in her own life. The crowd's eyes darted between her and the now disgraced couple, witnessing the unraveling of a once idyllic facade. Rachel raised her voice once more, cutting through the din. "Let this be a lesson in honesty, in integrity. I thought I could trust both of them, but trust is fragile, easily shattered by selfishness." Her heart pounded as she looked at the faces in the room, feeling their support and sympathy wash over her like a tide. "Tonight is not just about exposing Tom and Claire," she continued, her voice firm with conviction. "It's about recognizing our worth, our strength. No one deserves to be treated like this, and it's time we stop allowing those who betray us to dictate our happiness." The crowd, once divided in their loyalties, began to rally around her words. Rachel saw the expressions of solidarity forming among her friends, the subtle nods of encouragement. She could sense the shift in the energy, an undeniable wave of support rising to meet her. As she glanced at Tom, a mixture of anger and pity swirled within her. He was no longer the man she had shared her life with. He was a stranger, an embodiment of everything she had once believed in but could no longer trust. With a deep breath, she added, "This is my story now. I will rise from the ashes of this betrayal stronger than before. I will not allow this to define me. As Rachel concluded her speech, a round of applause erupted from the crowd, some guests standing to show their support, while others exchanged incredulous glances with each other. The atmosphere transformed from one of shock and disbelief to a collective embrace of resilience and solidarity. Rachel had stepped into her power, and in that moment, she knew that she was ready to forge a new path, leaving the remnants of her shattered marriage behind. Tom and Claire stood frozen at the center of the storm they had created, a public spectacle that would forever change the dynamics of their relationships. Rachel smiled, feeling the weight lift from her shoulders as she faced the future. Her future, unfettered and full of promise. Act 5. The Aftermath expanded. The morning after the party was a stark contrast to the chaos and noise that had filled their home the night before. The air in the house was heavy, thick with the remnants of shattered illusions and unspoken words. Rachel sat on the edge of the bed, methodically packing her belongings into a suitcase. Each fold of fabric, each item tucked away, felt like a deliberate step toward a new beginning. The silence was a blessing. Tom had not returned home after the party, likely too ashamed to face her or anyone else, choosing the anonymity of a hotel room instead. Rachel was relieved. She needed the quiet, the space to think and breathe without his presence clouding her mind. After all, the hardest part was over. As she folded one of her favorite sweaters, she paused, letting the soft knit fabric slide between her fingers. It was a sweater she had once worn on a cozy night in with Tom, back when things were good, when trust hadn't been a casualty of betrayal. For a brief moment, a pang of sadness tugged at her chest. But the ache was different now, dulled by a growing sense of peace. Yes, it still hurt. The lies, the cheating, the humiliation of it all. But there was also empowerment in what she had done. Taking control of the narrative, exposing the truth on her terms. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, breaking her reverie. A flurry of messages from friends filled the screen, most offering support and condolences, others still reeling from the spectacle she had put on the night before. Some couldn't believe it, Claire and Tom of all people. A few even asked how she had the courage to confront them so publicly. One message stood out among the rest: "You're a legend, Ratch. The whole town's talking about it." Rachel allowed herself a small, knowing smile. She hadn't done it for the attention or the drama, but there was something satisfying about the message. For so long, she had been the quiet, supportive wife, always the one to smooth things over, to avoid conflict. But last night, she had flipped the script, and people had taken notice. She could almost picture the stunned faces of her guests, the whispers that had followed her revelation. But the gossip didn't matter. The approval or disapproval of others was irrelevant. What mattered was that she had taken back her life. Tom and Claire had made their choices, and now they were reaping the consequences of their deceit. And Rachel? She was free. She zipped up her suitcase, the sound crisp and final. She glanced around the bedroom one last time. The room was filled with memories, good and bad. But now it felt like an empty shell of the life she once thought she had. This house, which had been their home for so many years, was no longer hers. It was just a place, four walls that had contained both love and lies. And she was ready to leave it behind. Her gaze drifted to the kitchen counter where the anniversary party invitation still sat, a cruel reminder of how different this night had been from what it was supposed to be. She walked over, picked up the invitation, and stared at it for a moment, the elegant script mocking her. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she tossed it into the trash. But something in her wasn't finished. Without hesitation, she grabbed a match from the drawer, lit it, and dropped it into the trash can. The flame caught, curling the paper into ash within seconds. Rachel watched as the words on the invitation disappeared in a swirl of smoke, feeling a symbolic weight lift from her chest. She walked out the door, suitcase in hand, her head held high. As the front door clicked shut behind her, she knew she wasn't just leaving the house. She was leaving behind the version of herself that had accepted less than she deserved. The betrayal might have knocked her down, but it hadn't broken her. Not even close. Rachel slid into her car, the engine purring to life as she drove away from the house and toward an unknown future. The road stretched out before her, endless and open. She didn't know what was coming next, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. For the first time in a long time, she was in control of her own story. Epilogue. Months later, Rachel found herself in a cozy cafe nestled in the heart of a new city. The morning sun filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room as she sat at a small corner table, sipping a latte and watching the world go by. The hum of life around her was peaceful, a far cry from the chaos of her old life. She had sold the house, cut ties with the people who had betrayed her, and started fresh in a city where no one knew her as Tom's wife or the woman whose life had imploded at a party. Here, she was just Rachel, a woman who had moved on and was learning to enjoy the simplicity of a life lived on her own terms. Her phone buzzed with a message from a close friend she had made since the move. "How's the single life treating you?" Rachel grinned as she typed back her reply, feeling the lightness of truth behind her words. "Pretty damn good." And for the first time in a long time, she truly meant it. As she put her phone down, she leaned back in her chair, letting the contentment of the moment wash over her. Life wasn't perfect. There were still challenges, still days when the hurt resurfaced. But it was hers. She had built it, piece by piece, and there was strength in that. Rachel smiled to herself, knowing that this was just the beginning. Whatever came next, she was ready for it. She was finally free, free from the lies, the betrayals, and the expectations of others. And in that freedom, she had found something priceless, herself,